planning and zoning meeting. Can we start with a pledge to allegiance to the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you. First on our agenda is our work session.
All right, thank you, Elena Helton, City Planner. We're going to get started with our work session. This is an educational series that was requested by the Planning and Zoning Commission to provide additional information to the commission and the general public about planning principles and best practices. And so today's topic is economic development and planning. So we've invited Larissa Philpott. She's the president and CEO of NEDCO. She's going to be here to talk to you about economic development specific to Nacogdoches and how that relates to planning and our current long-range planning efforts. Larissa's been the CEO and president of NEDCO since 2017, so over 5 years. And before that, she spent 17 years in the planning department for the city of Nacogdoches. So she was an intern for 3 years, spent 5 years as the assistant city planner, and spent 9 years as the planning director, and was actually on staff while we went through the last comprehensive plan update in 2003. So she's a wealth of knowledge, and we're so happy that she could be here today to share information with the commission.
Thank you all for having me. I think I know most of you, so thank you to Elena for that introduction, though. It's kind of fun being back here before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Mills and I spent many an hour together working through issues, so I appreciate all of your years of service. It's kind of an honor to be here for your last meeting. I appreciate you, the decades that we have spent together doing this. Want to run through kind of what economic development is. I want to run through what NEDCO is. I think that's not really well known in our community, what exactly NEDCO is and how we're structured. So first, we're just going to start with kind of an economic development 101. What is economic development? It is incredibly broad, but incredibly detailed at the same time. It encompasses all of those things on the screen there. It's really can be divided into two broad categories. The one that everyone thinks of the most is business development. And then the piece of business development that everyone thinks of the most is business attraction. That's actually probably 5% of what we do. The other 95% of what we do are the other pieces of that business development piece, which is business retention and business expansion. So working with our local businesses to help them stay here, problem solve, and then grow if they can. Entrepreneurship, helping our small businesses, which make up the vast majority of our economic activity here in Nacogdoches, helping them through their daily struggles. And then the other half of what we do and what economic development is community development, working through labor issues, working through infrastructure issues. I saw Steve Bartlett here. Steve and I work together a lot on infrastructure development because it's a huge piece of economic development. The benefits of economic development are obvious. If we can stabilize, if we can bring new tax dollars here, if we can grow our tax base here, that means everybody else gets to pay a smaller piece of the pie in order to keep our city services going. It improves our quality of life, brings better jobs. So first, I just kind of want to run through, especially in our current economic times, just a snapshot of Nacogdoches as it is today. You can see since the last probably 50 years there, our city population has roughly remained about half of our county population. So we are a very rural community. We are the county seat. All of our services that you need in our community are located within the city of Nacogdoches. So it's important when you're thinking about the types of businesses that we can attract or the types of businesses that we have here, that rurality is super important. Just a quick deviation there. For example, when we are looking at healthcare as an industry in Nacogdoches, if you break your arm in Mount Enterprise or 30 minutes to the east or west of Nacogdoches, you are coming to Nacogdoches for health care. At the same time, though, if you really love shopping at Nordstrom's, our community of 65,000 people is probably not going to be host to a Nordstrom's. So it's always important to keep that in context when we're thinking about who we are and what our economy looks like. Our median household income is still tracking behind the state. Sorry, the labels there are a little small, but the one on the left is going to be the city of Nacogdoches. The one in the gray bar in the middle is the county, and the blue bar on the right is the entire state. And so that first section is 2000, the middle section is 2010, and then the one on the right is the most recent 2020. So we're still lagging kind of behind the state, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is here in a moment. Sales tax collection has looked really good the past few years. One of my favorite articles, though, and books is called You Can Lie with Graphs. And I'm telling you that not because I'm lying with a graph, but it's important to note that spike over those last 2 years there. Hey, Ken. I told them we'd start without you because you've heard this speech before, Ken.
I appreciate it.
Keep in mind that since 2020, we've had 6, 7, 8, 9% inflation, and our sales tax collection numbers don't reflect any inflation adjustments. So while we've had great sales tax years, we're not losing ground. It's not quite as rosy as it looks there. So a little bit deeper dive into who we are as a community. Location quotient is a really fancy way of saying, do you have more jobs in this industry than other communities like you? So Nacogdoches has, one way of looking at it is Nacogdoches has more wood products, animal production, forestry and logging, food manufacturing jobs than other communities similar to us. A few years ago, NEDCO did an economic strategy report. We paid a company to work with us on an economic alignment strategy, and that study looked at this chart, looked at who we are as a community, and this encompasses the entire county, keep that in mind. And we said we really want to move the needle. We really look at that median household income chart, and we look at our job growth, and we're realizing that our median household income is not increasing. What do we need to do? And this consultant we worked with looked at this chart and said, these are ag-based jobs that you've had and they've built your community. And I know you're thankful for those ag-based jobs, but they are not going to move the needle as far as income growth goes. If you continue to attract wood products manufacturers and animal production jobs, you're not going to increase your average household income because you're too heavy in those categories. And those categories, unfortunately, do not pay as well as some of the new upcoming industries. So, just another little bit of information here. Our major employers, these are all familiar to all of you. Something that is important to keep in mind when looking at SFA's number, that 1,600 employees, that includes just their full-time staff members. That does not include graduate assistants. That does not include student workers. So when you add that number, and this is their official employee number, when you add all of those student workers and graduate assistants in, that number is 3,000, maybe 4,000 people. So that has a huge influence on our local economy. But overall, fairly diverse as far as our major employers go. Yes. Let me go back.
I notice there's quite a bit of difference in the county versus city. County having higher wages, it's 20% plus higher wages in the city. Do you know what's driving that?
That is probably largely due to college students living closer to SFA inside the city limits. Every single SFA student is counted in our census. That's a common misconception. I know I made about $7 an hour when I was a college student. And then also keep in mind what I said earlier about the county seat being, the city. Any services you need are going to be inside the city limits. And just as a nature of the way cities develop, lower income people tend to live closer to those services they need. If you have a lower wage job, you can't live 45 minutes from your job and pay gas to drive in every day. So in reality, a rural small town like Nacogdoches can sometimes function like an inner city as far as that goes. Great question. So kind of moving on to what NEDCO is and why we are here. So NEDCO is actually a 501c3 nonprofit. We function on a city investment of about $130,000 a year, and then another $120,000 a year from private members. That is because we are not sales tax funded. A large number, I won't say all of the other EDCs in the state, but most of the other economic development corporations in the state are funded through a portion of the sales tax. So in Lufkin, for example, a portion of the sales tax goes to the city, and a portion of the sales tax goes to fund their EDC. In Nacogdoches, a portion of the sales tax goes to the city to support those functions like police and fire and water and sewer, utility infrastructure somewhat. The other portion of that sales tax goes to the hospital district. And so we're not here to have that fight about that. We desperately need both of our hospitals in our community. That 1 cent pays for indigent care, pays for the ambulance service. But the nature of it is Lufkin's Economic Development Corporation in 2021 had about $2 million in revenue. Nacogdoches' Economic Development Corporation had about $320,000 in revenue. So because of that, it changes the way we do our jobs. Lufkin's EDC is able to buy land. They're able to lease that land or give it away or make cash grants to businesses that want to locate in their community. Nacogdoches' EDC has to focus much more on programmatic assistance. So we work on job fairs and workforce development. We work on business problem solving. I always tell people I don't know the answers to all of your questions, but I have the cell phone numbers of everybody who does. And so we try to help businesses solve those problems before they negatively impact the business. We also are big advocates for the city, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. So there's just some those numbers there showing the Lufkin sales tax versus the city's funding model. So since we do not have that 1 cent sales tax, what do we do? How do we do economic development? Well, really, it's honestly the more modern way of doing economic development. When the average person thinks about it, they think, well, you make cold calls to businesses and you chase smokestacks and you try to get factories here. Kind of like the 1980s model of economic development. We get to, or are forced to, because of our funding model, do it a little differently. Our job is to make Nacogdoches a business-friendly place. We do that through hopefully attracting skilled labor. We do that through working with our local partners in the community to develop avenues to develop that skilled labor, and that's something we've been working on a long time. It's a very complex piece, and it's probably the biggest piece we are missing in our local economy is a place to train adults for our workforce. We work to advocate with the city and the county and the state to make sure that we have the necessary infrastructure in place. This means not only water and sewer lines, which we work with a lot, but also things like broadband. NEDCO helped fund a broadband action plan a few months ago and found that 1 in 5 homes do not subscribe to internet service at their home. 30% of homes in the county have speeds lower than what is considered broadband, and 95% reported a desire for more broadband options. I think everybody in this room understands our broadband issues. We pay too much and we don't have enough options. And so we have taken that broadband plan to some of our service providers in the state. Those service providers, those internet service providers, are getting a lot of money from the federal government to expand. And so we have data that shows where they need to expand. We have data that shows what our residents are currently paying and what they want to pay, and are sharing that. We have great internet, access in the city of Nacogdoches. We don't have great options for that service, and we have terrible internet access outside the city limits. And so those are both two problems that we work to solve. We also work when the city is able to consider an economic incentive. We work with the city and that business in order to develop what's called a Chapter 380 agreement. Won't bore you about the details of that, but it essentially is a way that the city is able to essentially refund typically infrastructure investments for a business. So let's say a new business wants to come in on the far south end of town where we don't have any water or sewer lines available. The city can enter into a Chapter 380 agreement with a business and say, we'll put in those, or if you put in those water and sewer lines and bring 300 new jobs, we will refund you for that amount of money. So NEDCO's kind of in charge of working with that. We have done, I think, 3 or 4 of those in the last couple of years that totaled about $4 million over the last few years, and have several more pending. So this can be anything from subdivisions. We recently negotiated a subdivision Chapter 380 agreement. We did work with Mr. Conklin on infrastructure at the airport for the flight school, and then also some improvements. We worked on some improvements at Splash Kingdom as well. So we work, we advocate for I-69. We see that as a big economic driver. We often get site requests through the governor's office. Businesses come to Texas and say, I want to locate in Texas, and these are the things I look for. And the governor's office sends that out to us. Often on their list of site requirements is they want to be on an interstate. They don't care that we've got a low traffic 4-lane divided highway. They want an interstate badge. And so we are advocating heavily for the funding for I-69. Make sure I have all of my things checked off here. So talking a little bit about how planning and zoning and economic development intersect. That modern economic development process includes ensuring that we have a quality of life and a quality of place here. We don't chase smokestacks anymore. We chase employees. We chase people who want to live here and work here, and then the employers come to them. It's kind of strange. It's kind of a build it and they will come mentality, but it really is the way it is working across the country. If you look at places that are thriving economically, it's because people want to live there first. And so how does that intersect with planning and zoning? Making sure that we have a good balance of land uses across the community, making sure that we have enough industrial space for us to develop, making sure that we have enough housing, we have enough single-family housing, multifamily housing, making sure that we have responsible development so that we have adequate utilities, making sure that development is done in a way so that we have reasonable traffic patterns. All of those things that you consider on your list when you look at a zoning change and you say, does it meet these criteria? Those are things that are important to our quality of life. So with that, I will open it up to questions. That was just kind of a 30,000-foot overview of what we do and how we do it and how we intersect with what you do. Be happy to answer questions.
Any questions? No, thank you very much.
Pressing a button.
Larissa's like, I know Lila's got a question. Just in general, Larissa, I want to know how many businesses do approach us within a year, usually on average? Do you know that number, or is it varies all the time?
So there's kind of a multifaceted answer to that. First, I will say the last year has been the busiest I have ever seen, period, in 20-something years with the city.
Is it because of I-69 and the virtual workplace, or is it?
No. Well, I think we are seeing some population growth due to that.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think businesses across the country who were not negatively affected by COVID,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those restaurants and hotels and the kind of leisure industry, everybody else had a pretty good year economically,
Sure.
and they have money to invest. And so we're seeing these major manufacturers are looking for places to build. Texas is also an extremely friendly business climate, and so maybe these businesses don't have a lot of money, but they want to leave the state they are in and move to Texas. We have available land and we have available water.
Sure.
And so I think they're interested in that. SFA is a big driver. The people, these new or these industries that are moving are looking for innovation, and simply having a university in your community contributes to that. We unfortunately don't see every business that moves into town because there's no like business license requirement, and so we don't have a checklist of who opens and closes every month.
I see.
So I don't have that number. We just see the activity.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Mhm.
I have one more question
Yeah.
for this. We were talking about animal products and the wage median that's here in the city and the county. If we are looking at agricultural businesses, something I mentioned to Elena was agri-tours. A focus on something to bring that type of tourism in town for economic development.
Right.
Are we looking at stuff like that in general with NEDCO, or is that something that's been discussed? Is it even viable with the consultants that came up and talked to us about something about moving away from, was it 9.73?
So the first, I just want to make sure that I make perfectly clear that we are not advocating for moving away from our traditional ag businesses.
Sure.
They are what has built
Right.
our community and will continue to be the backbone. What we are looking at is what can we add to innovate and expand and
Sure.
make the pie bigger. So those targeted industries that came out of that study were information technology, because we do have a high quality of life. And IT jobs are those leading edge where they move where they want to live and they don't really care about any of the infrastructure because they just make it happen.
Sure.
Healthcare, because like I said, we do have 2 hospitals and we do have a large catch basin for healthcare. And so we think we can expand the specialties that we offer here in Nacogdoches. Advanced manufacturing, so taking that ag business, so let's say wood products, and instead of creating boards, we create furniture. So it's not just the basic product, it's that value-added product. And then aviation. We have the new flight school at SFA, and we actually, I said Lufkin luckily has lots of property that the EDC can own and control. We don't have that. Well, the city owns tens of acres at the airport that they do own and control, and we do have an underutilized area out there. And so we feel like aviation is an industry that we could attract.
Sure.
As far as all of the related things. Do we think Boeing is going to build 747s here? No, but we do think that they might dream big, right? But we do think that we could have refurbishment of planes or a cargo depot or things like that we just have never really sought out before.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank
Larissa,
you.
Thank you.
appreciate it.
I'll ask you the hard question later.
Okay, you know how to talk. Get in touch with me. Thank you all.
All right. Moving on, we have the open forum. In addition to public comment on agenda items, the commission offers an open forum whereby citizens may comment on governance issues over which this commission has domain. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the commission shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics which are not posted as an agenda item, and all comments should be addressed to the commission and limited to no more than 3 minutes. If anybody has a open forum issue that's not an agenda item, you can come up now. Okay, I don't see anyone. If anybody changes their mind, letting me know. We'll move on to the consent agenda, which really just has the approval of the minutes from the June 13th meeting. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All right. Anybody have anything needs to be edited or changed?
Nope.
No? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right. Those are approved. Moving on to the regular agenda, this is a consideration, discussion, and possible action On items removed from the consent agenda, nothing was removed. So then we're going to go down to our next agenda item, which is the public hearing on the consideration of a request to amend or revoke. Can't be and or revoke, can it?
Yes,
Can't amend and revoke it. You'd have to do one or the other.
yes.
The specific use permit pursuant to the section 118-174 of the Code of Ordinances for a garden shop and plant sales display or greenhouse in a B1 local business zoning district for Lot 1, Block 1 of the Plant Shed subdivision, which is located at 3123 Appleby Sand Road. This request has been initiated by the Nacogdoches City Planner.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Elena Helton, City Planner. I am going to spend a little bit of time on the front end, probably more so than I normally would, providing additional background information and from when this specific use permit was first approved to how we got to where we are today. And then I'll ask the applicant to come up and provide some additional information based on the plan that they've submitted for review. So as stated, this is approximately 1.6 acres located on northeast corner of Appleby Sand Road and East Austin Street. The property is zoned B1 local business, as are the properties immediately to the north and west of the property, and then the property backs up to the Colonial Hills single-family subdivision. This property was approved for a specific use permit for a outdoor plant nursery in 2020. And so what you see on your screen, this is that exhibit that was adopted as part of the ordinance that shows the preliminary layout and proposed improvements. The SUP process allows staff, the commission, and council to review these types of requests and impose any kind of conditions if necessary so as not to create any kind of adverse impacts on the adjacent properties. So it doesn't change the zoning, it's just another layer of approval for very specific uses. At the time of this approval, a number of the neighbors from the Colonial Hills subdivision did come to both the planning and zoning meeting and the city council meeting to express concerns about the development. This neighborhood has historically had drainage issues just due to the topography of the area. This corner does sit at the top of the hill, and Colonial Hills is located farther lower in elevation. So historically, property or water does flow downstream to the west of this property. But they didn't want this development to exacerbate that issue and increase the drainage runoff. And so there's a lot of discussion at that meeting about this proposed improvement and the additions and not exacerbating that drainage issue that the neighbors were already experiencing. So one of the conditions that were placed on the development included a number of things, one of those being the preservation of a couple of large trees on the property, one of those being that the parking and outdoor sales area would primarily be close to the street, so on the east and south sides of the property, but the main one was in regards to the sediment runoff and drainage. And so one of the conditions included, and I provided the text verbatim, that the applicant would provide a plan to control sediment runoff that would be acceptable to the city engineering department. So we left it vague so as to allow the engineer to work with the applicant to make sure that they met the engineering codes and that the proposal wouldn't negatively impact the adjacent neighborhood. And so here you see them in black, those are the proposed kind of outdoor greenhouses areas. The blue is the office and the green is that parking area. This is the site plan that was approved by staff as part of this development. These were permitted in July of 2020, and so they were approved based on the proposed improvements that you see here. And so you see the dark gray boxes, those are the actual structures, including the main office and some proposed outdoor greenhouses. And you see the parking in the front, there's some existing parking, and then there's some additional parking added on the north side and a pad for a dumpster. And so whenever we're looking at this plan, the proposed improvements include not only buildings, but pavement and any kind of other impervious surface. So gravel, things like that would have been shown on this plan in order to make sure that the drainage calculations were sufficient to meet the improvements that were shown. So there's actually an existing earthen berm on the western side of the property that the property owner agreed to maintain to redirect water from that back part of the property away from those neighbors. And based on these improvements shown here, that would have been sufficient. But then approximately in April of 2021, we started getting complaints because we had a lot of severe rain events during that time, probably more so than just your typical rain. So we started hearing complaints from the neighbors about drainage and runoff from this property. Specifically from Ms. German and Ms. Foltz, who live immediately behind the property. So staff went out and looked at the business. We went out and looked at the neighbors, and we noticed that there was additional gravel that had been installed in these areas that are shown by the red dashed lines. So this is compacted gravel, which isn't like pavement, so water can get through, but not at the same rate that dirt or grass or just regular natural earth. And so it does create additional runoff at a faster rate, and so it does impact the drainage in the area. And so we contacted the applicant and had been working with them for several months to get their engineer out there to do an analysis to confirm, hey, is your drainage still operating like it was intended to, based on your proposed plan? They came back and noted that in severe rain events, it was overflowing, and so there was an impact to the neighborhood. And so we worked with them for several months, going back and forth, trying to figure out a plan to mitigate this issue, whether by removing that additional gravel or making additional drainage improvements. We actually sent them a letter in November, which was a formal notice of violation that they were not in compliance with the conditions of the SUP, specifically the requirement to control drainage and runoff, because the plan that they submitted didn't match what was actually constructed on the property. And they had actually expanded the area for their outdoor sales area. So we sent them a letter in November. We didn't hear anything back from the applicant, and so we sent another letter in April, giving them a deadline to submit a mitigation plan. So not a plan for a plan, but an actual plan to mitigate the drainage issues. And the direction was that staff was going to initiate proceedings to amend and or revoke the specific use permit in order to come into compliance. And so that being said, the last thing that we want to do is shut down a business or revoke an SUP. This is a last resort for staff. Essentially, we just want to bring the issue to light to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, because essentially they need to amend their SUP anyway, because they have expanded the footprint of that outdoor sales area, and they have changed or impacted that drainage plan. And so staff is actually gonna, at the end, you'll see, we're gonna be proposing an amendment to accept the drainage plan that's been proposed with a timeline for improvements. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I'll back up. These are some photos of the property that we took a couple weeks ago. So this is the view from the street. At the top, you'll see the view from East Austin Street, so that's the driveway going into the property. And then the lower image is the street view from Appleby Sand Road. That's that exit only. This is the actual office sales building that's been constructed. This is the parking area. Portion of that is existing. The piece that you see on the picture that you see on the bottom, that's the new parking area that's been added. And this is really that area that we were talking about as far as new gravel. So this is the outdoor sales area that's facing East Austin Street. On the plan, this wasn't shown as pavement or gravel, and so you see this is a significant amount of gravel that's been installed. And there are some additional gravel paths that have been installed behind the property that have increased the impervious surface. And so when we talk about impervious surface, again, it's stuff that's not buildings stuff that's not grass and earth that water can be absorbed through easily. This is that back side of the property, so you can see a silt fence has been installed bordering those lots on Colonial Hills subdivision. And this is the proposed plan that's been submitted by the applicant and prepared by 215 Consulting, and they are in attendance. And so I'll let them get up here and speak to this in just a moment, but they have provided a plan to provide additional improvements to collect the water runoff and then redirect it to East Austin Street. And so I won't get too far in the weeds. I'm going to let Michael Delaney get up here in just a minute and explain it to you in more detail. But we have provided some zoomed in exhibits that show kind of the more detailed improvements. This is that portion of the berm on the north side of the property, and that portion on the south side. So that I would like to pause our presentation and let Mr. Delaney get up and just explain the proposal a little bit, and then staff will wrap it up. Michael?
We'll allow it.
Good afternoon, evening.
afternoon.
Michael Delaney, 215 Consulting. And so we were approached to kind of look at this and analyze what can we do to help mitigate any of these issues that have been identified. And so the first thing we had to do is just kind of run our analysis to find out and quantify what are we trying to combat. So the existing area that runs off to the west and kind of probably to the northwest, is about 1.3 acres of the 1.6 acre tract. So some of that actually does fall out into Austin and Appleby Sand today, kind of on the very front end of the tract near the frontage. So of that 1.3 acres, you know, they increased their impervious surface, kind of what Elena was talking about with the parking lot and the buildings. And so it did make an impact to how much can actually run off. That quantifies out to just about 1.8 CFS, which in our terms to you guys means a whole lot of nothing. So, but from our standpoint, in a typical drainage analysis, you know, anything under 3 CFS, we're not overly concerned about as far as how much that impacts. But in this case, that constituted about a 40% increase in what leaves the property to the northwest. So relative scale, that's fairly significant. And so what we wanted to do is come up with a design and plan that would eliminate that increase. Because that's by ordinance in a 25-year event, a design storm, we want to match what existing was. And so that's what this plan will do. We've got a berm that lines along the west edge of the parking lot. That's that gray shaded area. I don't have anything to point at for you guys to kind of show you. You can kind of see the gray shaded area that goes from the southwest all the way to the northeast down the middle of the image. That's going to be a berm that actually intercepts the water that's running off from the building, the parking lots, the gravel area that's been discussed, and then that's going to pond the water to allow it to breach into East Austin. So we're basically saying, okay, we're going to catch and intercept the runoff at the top, let it build up. Once it gets to a certain level, it's going to breach the curb of East Austin rather than going northwest into our adjoining neighbors. But as our neighborhood is, it is lower than us, so there is going to be some runoff that still goes by. We've maxed that at 1.2 CFS, which is a reduction in peak runoff. So we're actually, in our 25-year event, we'll reduce the amount that goes to the northwest by about 38%. So we're going to actually be able to decrease how much runs off to our neighbors to the northwest, which is really big in our opinion as far as helping comply with their specific use permit. But just kind of all that being said, this plan will actually be more severe than what the ordinance requires. Meaning we're overdoing it as far as what's required by your ordinances today. And that's one of the big things that we wanted to look at is let's make sure we kind of put this to bed, so to speak, for these folks and try to create an improvement that's going to work very, very well for all parties involved. So, with that being said, that's about all I had to add to it right now. Any questions that you guys have?
I do. Do you know what, who is the company that did the initial plan? Was it Akron Consulting?
Yes.
Do you know if they figured out what the outflow from the property was at that time?
I do not.
Okay. So we don't know what it would have been prior to the
yes,
development.
I did that analysis.
Oh, you
I
did?
went back before any improvements were made. That was my baseline.
Okay.
To say, hey, we need to see what it is before any improvements were made to this
Okay.
property. And that's what we looked at as far as our percentage increase of what he did, what the improvements show versus what they'll be after our improvements, after the proposed plan is implemented.
And
So
CFS, is that cubic feet per
that's
second?
cubic feet per second.
What was it at the time?
So prior to their improvements being made, when they purchased the property, you had the little asphalt lot that went through and some areas up there. It was about 4 CFS on a 25-year event. So 4 cubic feet per second would discharge to the northwest
With improvements, it increased it
by about 40%. So we went up to about 5.9 CFS.
And so this would your plan would bring it down to 1.2?
Our plan would bring it down a reduction of about 40%. So we're still going to have some area behind the berm that discharges naturally as it does today.
Right.
Because I can't make that come back uphill. Right. So,
You're trying to max it out at 1.2 CFS.
and so that's right. We're trying to max out, or we're trying to limit below the existing conditions.
Okay.
The existing conditions is before any improvements were made. That is the key that we're trying to get to, is we're trying to get back to that 4 CFS or below. And with the improvements that we have, our throttle pipe that allows water to continue downstream will only allow up to 1.2 CFS to go by. We'll have a released amount of 1.3, so we'll be at 2.5 CFS in a 25-year event.
Considerably better than what it was before they were on the property.
Correct. So that was the throttle we sized for what we call a 2-year event, which is at any given year a 50% chance of that storm happening. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions before? Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. So, just to continue with staff's presentation, if you read through the staff report, you'll see that there's specific conditions that are reviewed as part of any kind of specific use permit. These are the same that are reviewed with a zone change. The ones that we highlighted were those in regards to compatibility and supporting facilities. So is the development compatible and not injurious to the adjacent properties? And does it have adequate infrastructure, including utilities, access, and drainage? We find that when we brought this to you, it was not incompliant based on the plan that's been presented by the applicant. We find that it will bring the property into full compliance with these terms and conditions. And so what we're asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to do is to make a recommendation to the City Council to amend the specific use permit and accept their new plan, but with a specific timeline for construction. So in a minute, we're going to invite the applicant to come up here and address the commission and talk about the timeline for those improvements. So I have provided just a list of action options that the P&Z has, because we don't take a lot of these items forward for amendments or revocation, so it's something new that you guys don't do all the time. And so you could actually just not take any action and remand this item to the City Council and let them make a determination. You could make a recommendation to amend the specific use permit and accept the plan that Michael just presented to you guys. But we would ask that you have that the applicant commit to a specific timeline for the construction of those improvements. Or you could move to revoke the SUP. Staff does not recommend revoking the SUP, but that it does fall under that section 118-174. And we wanted to include it just as something that was a part of the discussion, just essentially to allow for additional flexibility in the recommendation and actions of Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. We did get a number of written response letters from property owners within the area, and you're going to hear from a couple of them during the public hearing. Ms. German and Ms. Foltz, they actually live immediately behind the property, and they're going to speak during the public hearing. They provided additional documentation and paperwork in your packet. And so of those letters that we sent out, let me see. We did send 14 written notices to property owners within the 200-foot area, and those are indicated on the image that you see on your screen. Of those, we received 4 written responses from property owners within that area. 3 were in support of amending the SUP, and 1 was from a property owner just explaining that they wished to come to some sort of agreement between the business and the property owner. We also sent out 44 courtesy notices, so that's that 500-foot buffer where we send postcards. And of those, we received 1 written response in opposition of amending or revoking the SUP. And then in addition, we received 4 written responses, but those residents and property owners were not actually included in the notification area. And we've had this come up in a couple of other cases where we've had people receive these notices, make copies, and then distribute them to the public. And so in the future, we're looking at ways to document or number these letters so we can keep better track of who's submitting or responding within the buffer and who's not. But we were able to identify that those last 4 in your packet were residents, but they're not located in the 200-foot or 500-foot buffer. So just for a point of clarification, but we always want to provide any written responses in the packet so you guys have a full picture of all the public comment that we received. And with that, I know we're going to have some people who want to speak during the public hearing, but I would invite the applicant to address the commission and talk about the timeline for the proposed improvements.
Okay. The applicant's invited to come up. Please introduce yourself at the microphone.
Hello, I'm Charles Schugert, Plant Shed, StarTex Ventures. I appreciate y'all's time. Timelines now, we've got to get with contractors. I'm looking at about a 6-month timeline. We've got a lot of movement to do, of material and equipment to get it out of the way to do. This is a pretty major, investment, as well as just overall changing the landscape. We're changing drainage from going 90% of it going through the neighborhood. Now we're trying to get 90% of it out into the street. So that's the timeline I'm looking at. I'm open to suggestions, from y'all, and I appreciate any input.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have one question, Mr. Sugar. I noticed that some of the notices were over a year ago, initially sent out to you, but we're only now kind of receiving an action plan. What was the reason for that delay?
The address that was on file was a old home address in Waxahachie, Texas. So there were a couple of notices that got sent there that I'd never received. I received one in the mail, and a week later I received a certified letter. So within a week's time, I received two, and then I responded immediately to those. The address has been changed since then.
Okay. And as far as this goes with the the timeline, if we set a 6-month timeline, is that something that you could meet?
I feel like it is now, yes.
Okay.
I've got to get with one contractor that's in attendance in a second that will be helping, but I'm comfortable with that, yes.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is the public comment portion. If anyone has any comments they'd like to make, please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself.
I do have a question, because I noticed that these two ladies' names were mentioned.
Yeah, sure, come on up. Sorry, you're on TV, so you gotta,
Brand new at this, so I'm just intrigued. Christy Cox. I'm the mother of Catherine Cox, who lives on that northwest corner. And I noticed the other two ladies that live beside us are on the agenda, but we weren't, so I thought, is this the time to speak? Okay. Are you coming with me? She lives on the Colonial Hills. Do you want to speak first, or I will, whatever? This is Catherine, my side.
Hi.
She does work here locally, so.
Yes, so we're on the corner where most of this is draining to. When it's draining through, it started creating ditches through the yard, and we're talking 3-foot deep, 8-foot wide ditches. It's wiping out my yard. We have had to fill up the pool since then, so we no longer have that. It was either pay $7,000-8,000 to fix the pool, or pay $3,000 to fill it up. So we are out thousands of dollars because of this problem. My dad does have a tractor just like sits in my backyard at all times. So every time it's raining now, it's not just the hard rains. It is July 4th rain. It flooded that again.
We have pictures where her dirt is washing across the road down the street to the neighbors. I went personally and hauled back 25 yeah.
Wheelbarrows.
Yeah, wheelbarrows, that's my word. Trying to bring some of it back, but I want to know that I appreciate them, because I feel like they are great people, and we're trying to work with them. We're not trying to sue anybody at this point, not the city, not them. Just, we'd like to have it fixed. I want her to not have to worry when it rains. And she's got mud coming up in her house in the first room, getting to the door. You know, like where a sliding door is. She even last time, she had, the shop vac was full, but she couldn't pick it up over the sliding door ramp, so she was having to get bowlfuls and go out the front door and dump it to keep it out of her house. And so she just got exhausted, and that's when we had that big storm, and I was like, you know, you're within 30 more minutes, you know, whatever you got. All right, whatever you got. It's praying after that, but it's just been a major issue, and at some point in time, it was all because of gophers or moles, and I'm like, it's more than that. We spent many $1,000s, many trips, a lot of dirt bought in Carthage, Texas, pulling it here, trying to fix it. We put in a deep wall, a retaining wall, which came as a recommendation from Steve. But we did that with clay there and it didn't but it's still going deep and under us and just washing and it's like tons of dirt. We've tried the silt fence and all that too, but we've done everything we know to do other than shy of having to hire professionals on our side. But we felt like the law that says something about whatever you do up there can't hurt the person down below you. And we're getting hurt by whatever's making the water come so fast. So I would just like peace of mind for her sake, not having to worry every time it rains, that we're having to battle this. Because we get stinky mud we have to clean up in there every time. Anything else?
The applicant proposed a 6-month timeline. Is that acceptable to you?
If it doesn't rain 12 times between, right here in a dry summer, it sounds great,
Looking back across the worst of the storms, most of those are usually done by July, August, so I would say 6 months is before the rain's gonna start again. I'd be okay with that. Just going through another year of this is gonna be tough.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Well,
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Anyone else have a public comment? Please come up.
Hi, I'm Cindy German. I live at 3308. And I don't know that we really have 6 more months. I have a retaining wall that I got a bid on. The way that Anderson designed it, it dumps on both my neighbors. I can't do that. I can't stop the flood coming down. There's a retention pond behind my house, and if y'all want to look at these pictures, and I submitted pictures.
We have them here.
Okay, and these are other ones, but this pipe that is pointed right at our yard, mine and Catherine's, for the retention pond that got grass growing in it, this thing fills up in no time, and it runs straight. It's got its path. The other thing is my catch basins are all now full. So I've lost that drainage. I've got to replace that retaining wall, but I don't know how much wall I need. I want to get it before it's raining. Now it's leaning. Do y'all want to look at these?
Sure.
Thank you, Pastor.
Anyway, the time thing is me, and if that wall does fall and it's right behind that retention wall, it's washing under the retaining wall. It's leaning, so if it gives, I'm gonna lose probably a quarter of my yard and probably some of theirs. And it's been going on. I have multiple notes where I've called, complained, asked, what are they doing? Are they following up? Are they checking it? And when it flooded the last time, that's when I called Elena. And she said, well, they hadn't been up there. And there's also a picture of when that engineer was talking about how much had been paved. I have a drone shot my son took, as well as a print off from CAD, how much is actually covered of that 0.81 acres that CAD says they own. And we're all protesting CAD, and they want to see what's going to happen on this meeting. And we're just stuck. My porch is flooded. It's never flooded before. My yard's trashed. My sprinkler's covered up. My catch basin's filled in, and my retaining wall's leaning. And when I talked to Steve about that pipe when I first found it, he said there were no pipes on the site plan. And I said something to Mr. Shugart. He said it was to keep his walkway from washing away. And the pipe's still there. So I feel like, he felt like his walkway was more important than our backyards. The other thing, if you go down Appleby Sand, the curb is a slanted curb. It's not like a straight up curb. If you come down from the gas station, like past the plant shed going that way. There's no curbs. The water, their driveway comes in and slopes down. So any water going along that road, there's no curb drains going that way. And when the water runs off, there's nowhere for it to go except down our yards. So it's a poor drainage plan in the beginning. I mean, before the plant shed went in, but this has just made it 10 times worse.
Any questions for Mr. Chairman?
You heard Mr. Delaney speak about the improvements that they want to make to significantly improve the runoff.
Well,
Is that acceptable to you?
those numbers, to tell you the truth, I don't know. I get out there every time it rains. We're all getting sump pumps, bags, trying to, barricade the houses. I feel like they've already had 2 years, because it was supposed to be approved before they did it, from what I understood, correct? And so that's been 2 years. And they haven't done it now, so why give them 6 more months? What if the weather gets bad? What if it starts raining? Then it's gonna delay it another 6 months. So
What would you propose?
I would like to see them fix it either faster or pull their license and give them a reason to want to fix it faster. I don't wanna see them go out of business, but I can't afford this. And my property is going down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, we still have your pictures.
That's
We'll get
okay.
those back to you.
I'll get 'em out in a bit.
Any other public comment?
My name is Janet Wyatt Fultz. My address is 3316 Colonial Drive. My parents initially bought the home in 1972, so I've seen it all over the years. I'm speaking about the erosion issues incurred on my property as a result of the water and sand runoff. It's an ongoing problem, and everything that happens in the fields of Appleby Sand and East Austin affect the homes on Colonial Drive. And by everything, I mean if it's mowed too often, if it's mowed too low, taking away the ground cover. When the massive concrete driveway was poured, the crushed gravel that was put down, the pallets of rocks, it displaces the sand, it changes the path of the water, and everything causes something to happen to us. And they immediately, almost immediately, in their favor, Mr. Schubert, they put up a silt screen. That helped, but now a portion of the silt screen became frayed, and a large section, like 10 feet, has been removed. So just since this last rain, I was shoveling out at least 6 inches of wet sand from my drainage basin. And when you have these rains that come in waves, you have to get out after the first rain, check your drainage system to make sure that before the next wave comes, it's not clogged. And that's hard, because it might be the middle of the night. I've been out at all times. In 2020, when we couldn't come in person because of COVID, so we were just called over the phone and we stated our case. At that time, I had spent $6,000 plus on a drainage system which has been enlarged or updated 5 times. And in addition to the money, that doesn't count for the money for just cleanup after every rain, after everything happens. In the 2 years that they have been in business, I have now spent $9,000 plus, so that's $3,000 more dollars in 2 years for more. And you can imagine if you had a drainage system in place, a working drainage system, that things happen outside your control from a business that's behind you, and you are completely wiped out. And you don't know what they're doing, you don't know when they're gonna do it, you don't know what to expect, but you know that what was just paid for, what was just put in, is gone. Or you have to start all over again. It's disheartening, and it's just not right. And in 2009, a local engineer, Milton Moore, he assessed the situation. He actually spoke at the meeting then because they were thinking about putting in a daycare, which they did not do. And he said, and I quote in my report from him, "Any change in the use of the property behind your home would certainly require a drainage review and plan to protect you and others from surface water damage." In 2020, when we all spoke about when they were going to buy the property, no plan was in place. They showed a picture of like an A-frame with some plants that they'd seen at another nursery. They showed some pergolas, and they wanted to make it nice, and they have. They've got a nice business. But there was no engineer's plan in place. And a couple of members on the board, they said they thought that they should table the discussion until they could see the engineer's plan. And that was voted down. They said surely if they were going to spend that money for the property, that they would follow through and do whatever they needed to do with an engineer, and that, so they just made the motion and it followed through. And like I say, he did put up this silt screen almost immediately, and that helped, but now a portion is gone. And so I saw the immediate damages just from that portion being gone. And I have spoken to somebody at the city 2004 when the original nursery, Sunshine Nursery, went in, 2009 when the daycare, they were thinking about it, and 2020. And the city people said once the property sells, it is the new owner's responsibility to do something about the drainage problem. So the city has known that there's a problem, but they have wanted to sell the property so that the new owners would have to assume that the responsibility for that. And they're across the board, what they always said was, you can get an attorney, you can take them to court. I don't want to take anybody to court. I want to have my system in place, and I'm not talking about beautification. I'm talking about literally staying afloat. So I don't think in their defense that they knew what they were getting into. I don't think they knew the problems we were having. I don't think they knew the cost of what it would be to have to fix it or have to just have what they're talking about in place. I'm concerned about the berm that was proposed. I don't know what the material would be because a previous owner of the business next to them, he was a builder. He put in a berm, or he bought a bunch of, like 3 truckloads full of dirt to form a berm. Within about 2 rains, I have past pictures of where that berm sand ended up. My drainage system, the street, my driveway, so I don't know what the berm material is, but I know it has to be something to withstand water and the wash because it's ongoing, it's continual. And this is the actual transcript of what I spoke in 2020. I feel like we're just repeating the same cycle. Nothing has changed except the situation has gotten worse. It's now coming, the stuff is now coming not only from behind my home, but from the side. And I've got pictures, they are worth 1,000 words, and you can see what's going on because it's coming from the side. I've got a foot of sediment on the side of the garage. We just have to continually get that shoveled out, and repairs are washed out. There's a picture of someone standing in front of my garage extending her arm. She can't reach the 7-foot overhang of the garage. If she goes to the back, she's almost bumping her head. So much sand has been deposited. I'm taller than she is. I do bump my head. It's just, it's horrible. It's ongoing, and we need a solution. And we were told we've all spoken to the Central Appraisal District because while property values are going up, ours are going down. And so that's where we are now. And I'll let y'all keep those, and I'll pick them up before the meeting in a couple of weeks.
Ms. Foltz? Just have a quick question for you. You said your parents had built that house in the 70s or lived there?
72.
72. Was there any sort of drainage issue in the 70s or 80s?
Yes, but it's been ongoing. I remember we would plant grass, and after certain rains, it would be kind of like a little mini beach, but nothing you couldn't deal with. You know, the grass would grow back. It's just gotten worse, and everything in the field of Appleby Sand Road in East Austin, I've gone up there in the middle of the night and seen where it sort of pools by East Austin. And then it hugs this fence that was put in by the business. It comes right down. Some of those pictures show the erosion path. For the first time in 50 years, the water has almost come in the house. I've had to get a storm door put in. There were 5 inches of water and sand. I had personally put in a brick pavement, little patio, completely covered in sand. I shoveled the sand off. Another rain, completely covered in sand again. I shoveled it off, and the water was like this far, this high up. So now the neighbors, everybody looks forward to the rain except for us. I look at the Weather Channel every day. I know it's like a 47% chance of rain for coming this Wednesday. We have to check our gutters. We have to check our drainage basins. We have to make sure everything's in place. We have old towels, blankets. I got my storm door. I've got my shop vac. Catherine's got her shop vac. Cindy's got a sump pump. And you shouldn't have to live that way. It's continual. And again, the Central Appraisal District said that they occupy almost twice the amount of property that's required before you need a retention pond. And I'm hoping this berm will help, but again, I don't know what material it will be made of because I've seen a berm come and go, literally, just wash away.
Any other questions from Ms. Foltz? Okay, thank you very much.
This is the ones that I filed, but this yellow,
Can you speak into the mic there?
oh, sorry. This yellow one is the one I got from CAD. They told me that is 0.81 acres, which is 36,000 something square feet. But the yellow is what is covered. That amount. So you see there's not very much left. And that retention pond sits right there. So, but I didn't have that one.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment?
Can I just show you 4 pictures I forgot to do?
Sure.
This is pictures of a silk fence, and right at first, your silk fence was this far off the ground. I was like, what good's that doing? But anyway, I don't know if they fixed that. One of them's a silk fence, showing you where we filled in the pool. A dog pen, she has like big, huge dogs, and they could be under that dog house, and now the sand's just big. The next one shows you the retaining wall, and then the last one shows you the water, the sand washing out into the road. Started on your hand. Okay.
Anyone else have a public comment?
I'm Jonathan Landrum, Landworks Landscapes here in Nacogdoches. I'm not an engineer. I can't add to the expertise from Michael Delaney, but the plan looks good to me. And if we can work out an agreement with Plant Shed, 6 months would be a fine timeline for us if that works for y'all.
What would the material be made out of? I know Michael's groups.
Yeah, whatever he specs, I'm assuming it would be some kind of clay, compacted clay that would be installed and packed and built up and then covered with hydromulch or side, something like that.
Something that won't wash away, obviously. Just for
That would be the plan, right? Yes, sir.
you worked on a similar drainage issue to this in the past?
Not quite the same, but we've done a lot of drainage work in town, worked with Michael and others from the city, and so we've done a good bit of that. The sand is an issue on that hill with, as in other parts of town, it's a problem, it's tricky. That's where Michael's plan comes into play.
Mr. Landrum, how many commercial buildings have you done berms for in the city? Do you know?
Most of our drainage work hasn't involved berms. It's mostly been underground drains, downspout drains, French drains.
Mostly for residential.
Mostly residential. We just completed a large job for the Magnolia Apartments on University. We put in a few thousand feet of underground drains for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'd like to visit again after the comments if nobody else is ready to speak.
Well, come on up. I think everyone else is done.
I didn't admit these prior to, I wasn't too familiar on how to do that. I'll just let y'all.
Thank you.
A lot of what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, first of all, we're willing to work with the neighbors and make this right, period, first and foremost. This is a very extensive plan. I also have been taking pictures for the last couple of years because that's the only timeline I have on the property. The first page, and the challenge is here is the Coxes at one point in time decided they wanted to redo their fence. In May of 2020, a day before we closed on the property, the complete landscape buffer was demolished on our property. It was taken down to build a fence. When you remove that much vegetation from that area, it creates a major problem. All the root base is now gone, it's dead, water's gonna travel through the roots. I mean, there's an issue. So what you're seeing there and I'm sorry I don't have a copy, I only printed 5, but on the first 2 pages, I believe, it's kind of a timeline of the progress. When we noticed there was a possible risk at sediment running into the backyard, we put 3x5 rock to stabilize the area. The last page or 2 shows the Coxes dumping sand over our fence into our property, which continues to wash back down into their property because it's sand. She did say they put, I don't know how many loads of sand on their property. It's also going on ours over the fence on top of the rock that we've already put down. So I don't want to take away from the plan going forward, the drainage plan, but again, I don't want to leave and go, we've given up. We haven't. We've maintained, we've controlled as best we could up to this point. And with the help of Delaney, we'll move forward with the new site plan. The drainage plan is basically what it is. So I at least wanted y'all to see that. When you remove that much vegetation, and the thing about that is, and do you mind pulling up the CAD where the houses are? I don't know how to do that. The thing about that is, the Cox's property, everything filters through theirs. That's kind of the drainage point, and then it goes to the others. So if you look at so they're lot 6, block 54. And then just north of there is Miss German at lot 17, block 54. And then the other lady, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Full is the next one down, best I recall on my records, lot 8, block 54. She's a pretty good ways away from the plant shed property, and I didn't include any pictures of the drainage behind her house on the pipes and stuff she's installed. So I just wanted y'all to kind of get an idea where everybody was on that map, so you could see the distance from the plant shed property. Do y'all have any questions for me about existing drainage, the plan moving forward? I'm more than happy to help. If I need to, I can get Mr. Delaney back up here.
My question to you, Mr. Shugart, is when you started putting down more gravel, that you knew that there's a flooding issue, but you could continue to keep extending it to expand your footprint for your business, which is great. I think that's great that your business is doing well enough to do that. But were you aware that that would cause such a severe drainage issue concerning all these years of drainage problems for your neighbors in the back?
The gravel was put down right off the get-go. There was
Okay.
no add. It was
Okay.
done.
Okay,
We actually stopped construction and we didn't add the second greenhouse on the site plan. I don't wanna try that. There's a second greenhouse that's going in. We stopped that because we were like, well, let's see what the ground does, okay? The gravel, it's road base, it's not gravel, so it's heavy rock
okay,
area. About 4 inches down below that road base is straight clay. There's no sand.
right,
We did soil samples. Delaney included that in a report he wrote. When it hits that clay, that water, once it saturates that clay, it's
Sure.
going downhill.
sure,
So you don't see it, but it's going downhill.
okay,
So we will take care of all surface drainage from the new site plan and redirect it as much as we can without trying to make water run uphill into
Sure.
Austin.
okay.
There'll still be a throttling as to what Mr. Delaney talked about. I can't get into those numbers. They're
Sure.
kind of beyond me.
Thank you, Mr. Schiggert.
Ross, was the clay base there before you
Yes.
purchased? So it was
There,
existing?
there was existing road base there, and we did not extend our footprint on impermeable area outside of 14,000 square feet, whatever the requirement was. There is no retention pond on our property now. There is a berm. There's a berm and there's a low spot in the ground, and when it fills, it distributes. There is no retention pond on our property. But yes, the clay was there, there was road base there. You can backdate satellite images, which I didn't do that, to see what the coverage was at that time, which helps, but again,
Sure.
we wanna make it right, we wanna fix it.
With some kind of French drain?
If, I wanna try to use this, did I just hit this, okay. On the site, the proposed site plan, those black lines, there's one, you might have to help me on this, Delaney. There's 2 catch basins, as well as we catch the gutters off of the building and it goes into a pipe. So this is all piped to a common corner, and then from that common corner is where it throttles and discharges the lesser amount until it gets overcome, and then it sends it into East Austin. So the gutters, the drive, everything gets caught. There's no French drain, but it's being piped into a common pipe.
And that'll be added on, that's what
Correct.
you're working to do?
Yes, correct. That's part of the plan, yes.
Do you know how big those pipes will be, Mr. Schiggert?
10-inch, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 10-inch on the main line,
Okay,
and then a 6-inch throttling pipe going over through the back of the yard. And then the rest will drain into East Austin through basically a ditch, an open, I say a ditch, it's not gonna be a foot deep.
what about for sediment control for those pipes? Do you know what that plan is? I don't know if Mr. Landrum would be best to answer that question, but
Sediment, it's water. There won't be sediment coming off the building or off of the paved parking. That's what we're catching. We're catching the impervious area.
Okay.
So there won't necessarily be any sediment.
okay, thank you.
I mean, there'll be your natural
Sure.
driveway sediment and
Sure.
things of that nature. Nothing created by the property itself.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Schiggert? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh.
Do you want some water?
Need water?
Let me
or
grab some.
anything? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Cox.
2 little comments. The sand, when we dumped it over, is still on our property because the property does this and our fence cuts across it, so we're trying to stop the flow. So the sand over the fence, that was still our property. And when we said that we cleared out a bunch of vegetation, we didn't go in there and scrape dirt or anything. We just tried to get somebody else's junk that was on that lot behind us, and this is not your lot, it was the lot to the side of you that's blank and open. We were trying to get it off our fence, it was leaning, the fence was rotten, it needed replacing. We worked our tails off replacing, but we got approval, you know, for all the markings from utilities and everything. And we created just enough space right there to put our fence up. Okay, so it's in a, what do you call it when you get the 10-foot? It's a 10-foot easement where we were. Right. That's what we cleared. Now, any trees that we cut down were on our side of the fence because there were entirely too many. We kept the crepe myrtle and got rid of everything else on our side of the fence. There was one more thing. Anyway, I was gonna tell you this, that whole big junk and whatever got accused, I mean, some of it could have been ours throwing here and there, but my husband went back and loaded up a big, long trailer, high full, and we hauled it to Carthage to get rid of the junk, you know, just to make peace here, but, okay, good. We're good.
Thank you.
Ms. German, or Ms. Foltz? She had her hand up too.
The silt screen y'all put up really helped, but one section was removed.
Ms. Yeah, sorry, you
The
have to.
silt screen they put up really helped, and they did it almost immediately. Are you planning on replacing that
Miss-
section that was taken down?
Miss,
Oh,
you
are
have to
planning on
talk into the mic.
replacing the section that was taken down?
She's asking if you're planning on,
Pending approval of this,
Yeah.
there's silt screen on this drawing, and it will be around the perimeter of the property, up to the concrete drive at the beauty shop.
Okay.
My question is that, pond divot in the dirt, is that gonna still be there, and is that pipe still gonna be pointed at us? Because I've got out there in the pouring down rain and videoed where that water overruns that, I don't know what you call it, I'll call it a divot. Anyway, it runs over, it goes to a utility box, a phone box, it cuts down through Catherine's yard, it splits there, it comes down my yard, and it runs all the way down the fence. In fact, that silt fence she's talking about, where it connects to my fence, is this far off the ground. I've watched raccoons go under it. So it's only catching stuff at the top. It's not catching anything at the bottom. That water runs along that fence and then down into her catch basin. You see what I'm saying?
well, yes, we do. That would be an answer that the engineer can actually.
Yeah, you mind coming back up, Michael, and responding to that?
So everything west of the berm is gonna be left as it is, but everything east of the berm is being intercepted. And so the amount of area that's contributing to that, the pipe that she's referencing is gonna be cut off by the berm. So
Okay,
your drainage area that can contribute to that flow is gonna get cut off.
okay,
So that's what we're trying to control.
perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett, you had a comment?
Good evening, Steve Bartlett, city engineer. Just wanted to clarify a couple things if we could. Can you help me, let me switch back here. Where was the aerial drawing? Lena, don't know.
Here, Steve, back. You didn't go back far.
I can go back far enough. The CAD. Had the lot numbers on it. There we go, that's good.
Well,
Okay, just-
Rhonda, can you get the, I'm sorry.
Who is it?
I appreciate it. Sorry about that.
I saw Ken lock the door, if that means
I
anything.
figured, as soon as I grabbed it, I was like, Ken Deppish?
Just a point of clarification, and I've had, quite a few visits with our residents and with the owners, and so been involved from all standpoints. So wanted to make sure we understand a couple things. The pipe that's Ms. German refers to is basically a culvert under walkway area, so it gets drainage built up behind it because the walkway's higher, and drainage comes through that. But it's basically acts as a culvert. I believe it's a 4-inch pipe possibly. And so that's the pipe that she sees, and water does come through it. I've been out there in the pouring rain, and it's just literally backing up in some of these paved areas. Secondly, it's important to kind of understand that, if you'll look at the lots there with me, so this property, the plant shed property, has runoff to lot 6 and half of lot 7, okay? The south half of Miss German's is what this sheds to. The north half of Miss German's comes from the property north of the plant shed, and even the property north of that that's still owned by Five Star Real Estate. So I say that only to say, because they certainly have problems. I've spent hours in their backyards, and we've talked about solutions, and they certainly all have issues, and they had issues before this started. But what I want you to understand is what they do at the plant shed won't mitigate all of that, because the two properties to the north are still contributing 100% to the Fultz property, to lot 8, if I said that correctly, is from that, so it will not receive a benefit from doing this. And Mrs. German's will still have some runoff from that lot to the north and erosion that comes with it, so. And then lastly, the first initial plan, excuse me, a fully engineered sealed plan by an engineer out of Longview was submitted as part of the permit package. So I know they may have felt like no plans were submitted, but they were, and it was an engineered plan with calculations that came along with the permit. So anyway, any other questions for me, be happy to answer, so.
And that plan that was submitted, I mean, from looking at it, I don't read these plans on a daily basis, but it looks like it only shows the asphalt on the parking and drive-through area, and there's no gravel
Correct.
plan for the rest of the.
Correct.
Okay.
And as Mr. Delaney kind of explained to you, although the numbers aren't huge in terms of what we look at as offsite drainage, the percent increase was, and you've already had hypersensitive properties downstream. And so a little bit of extra can be a lot. That was combined with the kind of the way Elena opened up with you today. We had some really bad rains that have happened. And so how bad were they in comparison? We can't quantify and answer that other than to tell you they unfortunately were the recipient of an increased runoff. What was added at the plant shed, and you can see in the aerial, the parking areas and all that have been a crushed granite, I think mostly material, which does have more runoff. And so that's what we identified as being deficient from the first plan, was not so much that it was engineered poorly, although I'm not sure it all finally graded out the way he intended it, but put that aside, is that we have more semi-impervious to impervious area that just made a bad situation worse. So that's when we've triggered, hey, we need to go back. We asked them to get their engineer to come out and say, hey, is there an impact here? And so when we all established there was an impact, the next thing was, what's the solution? Let's go look at solutions. So they've now changed engineers and gotten Mr. Delaney. I think that was a great thing to do, and I think he's come up with a very, very difficult situation, has come up with a way to try to mitigate most of this. So important part to understand is it won't completely make all the water go away, and we've had that discussions with them, but hopefully it will slow it down. It will decrease those volumes, and everything's based on a rainfall event, y'all. You heard Mr. Delaney talk about a 25-year storm, and that's the basis for this design. So God can exceed anything that we build, unfortunately, and he does occasionally. So, but anyway, I think this is a good approach. I will tell you, I've been through the plan before this meeting with Mr. Delaney and his calcs in detail, and I think this is a highly creative solution. So, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, sir. Governor?
Any other comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section. Let's move on to discussion on the item. And as was brought up earlier, we were told we had 3 options. We could take no action, which I understood to be essentially punting and allowing the city council to make a decision. We can revoke the specific use permit or amend it with conditions, which would still have to go back to city council. Either the amendment or the revocation. So before we get into that discussion, any questions for our city planner? No? Okay. All right. Shannon, you have any thoughts? Just start at one end and go down the other.
Just comments. I live in the neighborhood too, so I can understand. I run and walk that area all the time, so I completely understand and sympathetic to it. So I can also say that I've worked with 215 They're an incredible group. So whatever 215 says will stop that. We've done some work with them too, and they've done a fabulous job. So you should find some comfort in knowing that whatever 215 suggests, it should absolutely address the problem that they're looking at. I think we can all agree that doing nothing will, we got to do something. And we need the plant shed there because it would do no good to abandon the property. So I think, that's obvious. And I've known, in full disclosure, I've known the Shugart family for decades, and it's a great family. And I know they want to do the right thing. So I'm sure we can get to something here where everybody agrees and move forward.
Thank you. Any comments?
Drainage is a problem all over town. It's a problem in my neighborhood. There's not a one of us that hasn't had some kind of drainage issue. And you've got to do the best you can do, but I don't think putting these people out of business makes any sense. So I think we can work out something to help the situation without closing them down, because I definitely don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think if you revoke the specific use permit, it just maintains us where we are right now. So, we need to have some plan that gets something fixed. I'm pretty impressed with what 215's put together. I think it'll greatly help from the runoff from this specific lot, but a little concerned about what the city engineer had to say about the neighboring lots. And if we're continuing to get heavy rainfall events, I think those problems are going to continue unless there's some sort of plan developed with those neighboring property owners. And so, but, that's not in front of us right now, but I just want to bring that up as a potential issue, because I hate to see this come back up if we've done everything we can on this piece of property to alleviate the drainage issue, but it's still causing problems because of heavy rains hitting neighboring lots. I'm kind of between on this one. I think just punting this up to city council, letting them kind of take a crack at the thing from scratch, or sending it up with a recommendation of accepting the plan. And that's mainly based on the timeline for construction, because I feel like this has been going on for a long time, and personally I feel like we should be able to get it fixed in less than 6 months. That's my feel on that.
I would tend to agree with you, Ken. My thoughts are the same. It's been going on for a couple years. Just like Mr. Bartlett had said, the city engineer said the property north of the plant shed, this is not all their fault. Those people also have to take care of what's happening to drainage. And concerning weather events, we all know that we're getting more and more severe weather. We can't help what nature intends. And so I do think we need to fix this. I am concerned about the timeline, but not all placing just fault on you, Mr. Shugart, on trying to fix the problem. And I do think with Ken that there can be something that can be expedited, hopefully. Mr. Mills? Commissioner Mills?
Well, it seemed to be an ongoing problem. In this particular area. We had prior problems before the plant shed started. And like the engineer said, it just kind of added to that. I would recommend to the homeowners north, the people that live north, that maybe the two engineers could work together so they can help with the drainage of the houses that's affected from the plant shed, as well as the the people who are living north could also work together and kind of put their engineering plans together. And that would help solve the problem that the lady having with the loss of sand. Because if you take the plant shed water and move it, and then you got water from the north, then you're gonna come back with a complaint with the water from the north. And if you could work those plans together, then the problem would work a lot better. I know that this can be resolved. Drainage is a problem in Nacogdoches, and so it's hard to solve all of the problem at once, but we can solve the problem by working together and everybody do their part with the drainage problem. The city, the plant shed, and the residents, everybody work together with the problem, and I'm sure that the problem can be resolved. And I'm recommending that we accept the recommendation of the engineers, you know, that's just my point of view, and work from there. And I can't say about the time limit because he said you can get the engineers in 6 months and you may not because, you know, appointments for people now are busy. So you can set a time. You know, you can give them some kind of range from 3 to 6 months, 6 months at the longest, and hopefully within 3 months, if possible. But you could set a time range in there for that to kind of give them a little more time and expedite time at the same time. And that will kind of speed it up. And in the event that you have weather problems, well, you could set a time range in there to help the situation. That would address the problem and give them time at the same time, not delay the problem. My suggestion.
You wanna make that a motion? No, I'm just kidding. Does anybody wanna make a motion or have any other comments?
Make a motion to accept the plan. Do we want to add time limit to that?
Staff would recommend that a timeline be included in the recommendation.
I think you have to have one or,
Yeah.
All right.
or I don't know how you enforce it.
Well, I'll make a motion to accept the plan and give them 3 to 6 months to complete it. It's my motion.
I would second that.
I will third that.
And that's an amendment of the specific use permit, basically with the new plan in a 3 to 6 month timeline? Okay. And we have a second to that. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right, that passes. Thank you all for your comments and your time tonight, and for all the work you put into your presentation. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Have some pictures.
I don't think so. These are the ones.
There's somebody else, the large pictures.
We have them in our.
Yeah, all those photos were included in the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Nope, it's, this is,
Not yet. Spiritually, I did.
we adjourn yet?
Already an hour late.
Right.
Well, you shouldn't make dinner plans. Everybody knows that.
I know, Shannon, what are you thinking?
We got one item left, Ken.
Did you look?
You are not an optimist.
I'll fly you there, don't worry.
All right, so moving on to number 7, city council decisions on planning and zoning cases.
Wait, I'm sorry, Ken, could you
Yep.
pause for
Sure.
one second? I think I want to make sure that everyone watching at home can hear the recording. So we want to let a minute for people to exit the room while we continue the
Sure.
agenda?
Sure.
Thank you guys for
I think we're
coming.
good. All right.
Appreciate your
That,
time.
that was the planner's way of saying you don't have to go home, but you have to leave.
Or shh, inside voice.
I think she was saying we better attend to business.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Again, number 7, city council decisions on planning and zoning cases. On June 21st, 2022, the city council took action on the items listed below, which was the zone change from PD to R4. In the Creek Bend subdivision, it looks like it was denied 4-0. Any comments on that?
Yes, so Mario Wesley actually submitted a withdrawal of the application after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting where you guys made a recommendation to deny the zone change, and he's already submitted an amendment to the PD. And so, and we communicated that to the council, but they just wanted to go ahead and move forward with a vote to reflect the desires of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then discussion and possible action on future agenda items.
Yeah, so FYI, you guys are going to have a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on the 25th to hear a request for a specific use permit for a tattoo parlor in the Northview Plaza Shopping Center. And we're scheduled to have that neighborhood meeting this week. So Wednesday at 5:30, we're going to have that neighborhood meeting. I can't remember if it's at the, Juan, do you remember if it's at this, in here or at the library?
For the tattoo?
Mm-hmm.
It's at the library.
Yeah, at the library at 5:30. And so we'll be bringing that item to you guys. And also, we're going to be coming forward with some work session items to talk about some temporary amendments to the zoning ordinance that we can make to address some of these recurring concerns that we keep hearing from the neighborhoods in regards to multifamily development and neighborhood design and things like that. And so that's coming soon. And so just wanted to let you guys know there's a meeting on the 25th. And that we'll also be scheduling, we'll have a presentation to schedule future educational series topics too. So,
Elena, are these neighborhood meetings, in your opinion, helping?
yes, I think
Okay.
so. I think it goes a long way as far as, especially staff and how we're preparing our recommendation and conditions that we may place on it, and also kind of preparing the applicant to be able to know if they want to move forward, if they want to make changes. So, yes, I think they're very beneficial, and especially with the neighbors just understanding what the request is before the actual meeting.
Sure.
So clearing up all that confusion that tends to happen at the podium when we're actually
I
hearing
think
it.
those meetings remove a lot of frustration of the applicants as well as the other peoples around them to help them better understand what's happening so they don't discuss that at P and Z.
Yeah, it helps eliminate a lot of misinformation that tends to get spread on social media or within groups who just don't know, because oftentimes we're the last person to get called. So that in and of itself has been
great.
very beneficial. So,
Is a specific use permit always required for a tattoo parlor in a business
yes.
section?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you were gonna do like Botox, you don't need one.
So that's considered cosmetic, and that falls under beauty parlor. So that's not our medical office, so that's not considered a tattoo parlor.
What's the difference?
Yeah, tattoos are.
You can talk to my wife.
So,
that-
so,
I'll tell you.
so Botox is actually an injection
Yeah.
of
I know what Botox is. I'm saying what's the difference between the procedures?
It's also a license, so a tattoo license is a
Okay.
different health permit than just
Yeah.
general cosmetic. So there
Okay.
are some differentiations between what the state requires for a health code too.
Is that a common, I mean, I don't have any tattoos, but, so I don't know, but is that normally required to have, in most cities, to have a specific use permit for a tattoo parlor?
In some, when I worked in the city of Lufkin, they required a specific use permit in some zoning districts. Some other cities allow it by right in more intense zoning, so industrial districts and things like that. I can't, I've only worked in a handful of cities, but usually if there's not a specific use permit, then there's additional supplemental standards in place. So you can do this, but you have to be so many feet away from a residential area. Or you have, there's additional restrictions placed on it that they have to incorporate into their development if there's not a specific use permit in place. Does that make sense?
Do something with the chemicals you're using.
No,
It doesn't?
no, it does not. Because all those activities are interior. So, and the chemicals really, you're just talking about ink. So I think Historically, there's been some things that
Are there
have,
any, like, Fourth Amendment concerns with that, with the city?
Not
Should we
that I'm
get that on
aware
a future agenda?
Well, their health code.
Surely,
health
if we
code.
can, if we can limit that, we can limit, like, check cashing places.
again, I can't tell if you're joking or not.
No, I'm
So-
serious.
serious.
Okay,
He's serious.
okay. So I think historically with
Or
tattoo
title
parlors
loans.
and
Or
some
liquor
other
stores.
businesses that are considered like vice in nature, those have been associated with certain
I
activities.
think usury is an ultimate vice.
Well, and I think they're just not as, they're not as,
They don't have lobbyists.
no. They're not as controversial as they used to be, and they're not associated with the same
Yeah.
type of nuisances that I think historically they have been.
Yeah.
Right.
They're much more mainstream.
Right.
And so tattoo parlors have a different,
Yeah.
I think you know what I'm
Yes,
getting at.
yes,
Thank you.
I wanted to
Yes.
say that, but thank you for saying that eloquently.
Not changing the subject, but did I hear, is this your last meeting?
No, so he'll also.
Maybe.
He will be attending the July 25th Planning and Zoning
Maybe.
Commission meeting. But Mr. Mills, his term was up and he did not reapply for the commission. And so his appointment will be filled with someone else.
Well, Mr. Mills, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
everything. I've learned a lot from you, and I appreciate your leadership, sir.
Right, hope so.
You better be here at the next one.
I just want to add something real quick. I misspoke about the location of the neighborhood meeting. It's actually going to be here,
Alright.
not at the
It'll be
rec
right here.
center.
Oh, okay.
I won't be here, Rhonda. I'll be out of state. Apologies.
All right. And that's all that staff has?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Thank
think
you.
we're adjourned.
All right.